Good morning, everyone. Prior to calling the meeting to order, I'd just ask a couple of things. A, if you can just make sure you're on mute if you're not speaking. I also want to take a moment to introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Naila K. Bird, and I currently serve as the appointed clerk of courts for Cuyahoga County. In this role, I serve the Court of Common Pleas General and Domestic Relations Divisions and the 8th District Court of Appeals. Throughout my career as an attorney, a prosecutor, a civil litigator, an in-house counsel, and now as the clerk of courts, access to justice initiatives have been a priority for me. I've been proud to be involved in equity projects such as bail reform, Ohio Legal Help, and the Bail Project. I have also been appointed to various governors' task force to discuss issues relative to gun reform. Executive Budish has asked me to serve as the advisory council's point person and liaison between the internal and external equity groups. I welcome this opportunity as I strongly believe this is important work, and I look forward to working with you and providing support to this council. I'm going to take a moment to apologize ahead of time if our initial meeting seems lengthy, but we have much to cover in order to execute a positive, focused, and results-driven process to achieve this council's goal. I'm going to take a roll call, and I'd ask that you unmute yourself to just indicate if you're present on this call. And this is in no particular order, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. Danielle Sydnor.
Sydnor, yes, I'm here.
Say it again, I'm sorry. Say the last name.
Sydnor.
Sydnor, I apologize. Good morning.
Morning.
Sheila Wright. Cordell Stokes. Victor Ruiz.
Here, thank you.
Good morning. Stephen Cavanis.
Present.
Marsha Maccabee.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Eddie Taylor.
You pronounced it correctly. Good morning.
Good morning. Dr. Heidi Gillette.
Good morning.
Good morning. Randy McShepard.
Good morning.
Good morning. Habiba Rashid Grimes.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. India Pierce Lee.
Present.
Hi there. Phyllis Harris.
Good morning.
Good morning. Reverend Kenneth Chalker. Rabbi Joseph Caruso.
It's Josh Caruso. Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh Caruso. Okay. Janice Contreras.
That was really good. Good morning.
New York City and me. Good morning. Levine Ross.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. And Yanela Sims.
Good morning. You pronounced it correctly.
Good morning. I'd like to now move into sort of a reflection. As we all know, the tragic killing of George Floyd due to excessive use of force by a Minneapolis police officer and the hard hit of the coronavirus fatalities on the Black population have highlighted systematic inequalities in institutions throughout our nation. I'd like to offer a moment of silence to reflect on the lives lost as a result of these systems of injustice and inequalities. Okay, thank you. As for public comment, as we know, we're being live streamed so that the public can participate in this meeting. I've also set up an email address for the public to use and to submit public comment. That email address will be posted on all of our agendas, and it's also posted on the county website. It's my intention to check that email the day before our scheduled meetings, and if we receive a large number of emails, I will forward them to you in advance of the meeting so that you can read them. If we don't receive a large amount, maybe under 5 or 6, I will just read them at the beginning of each meeting. There were no emails submitted to date, so I have nothing to read to you today. And just for your own records, although I believe it's on the agenda I distributed, that email address is equity@cuyahogacounty.us. Now I'll turn to the message from the county executive. Executive Budish, would you like to open this first meeting of this advisory council with some comments?
Yes, if I can figure out how to unmute myself, I will. Thank you.
There you go.
All right. I want to thank all of you for agreeing to serve on the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity. There's nothing that we're doing in the county that's more important or more challenging. Tackling racism is really hard. Tackling racism in the midst of a health crisis and an economic crisis is really, really, really hard. The county government has been working to correct the symptoms of racism for years. Much of what we do as a county is aimed at enabling each of our residents to reach their full potential, tearing down the barriers that stand in the way. For example, we spent millions of dollars to expand high-quality pre-kindergarten education focused largely on minority children. We spent millions of dollars to support small businesses owned by people of color. We spent millions of dollars to provide COVID testing in underserved minority areas. We're spending millions of dollars to close the digital divide for minority families. All of those efforts and more are extremely important. They make a difference. They're designed to eliminate the long-standing barriers preventing success. I hope this committee considers and presents additional initiatives to alleviate the impacts of racism. But these efforts address the symptoms, the effects, not the causes. It's hard to fix the symptoms. It's really, really, really hard to fix the causes, because to fix the causes requires changing people's attitudes and beliefs. It requires a major cultural shift. For centuries, people have hated, discriminated against, even killed other people because they're different from them. Wars have been fought by people of one religion against others who pray to a different God. People have been killed because they love differently than others. People have been enslaved and killed because their skin is a different color. In some respects, we've been making progress. The country elected its first Black president. The Supreme Court approved gay marriage. Cuyahoga County elected its first Jewish executive or commissioner. We've made some progress, but these advances don't change the underlying problem. People are suspicious, often hate, and sometimes try to hurt or kill people who are different from them. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." If we really want to eliminate structural racism, we need to identify and fix the root causes. For that type of cultural change to occur, we must change people's attitudes and beliefs. Funding minority-owned businesses is very important. Supporting better educational opportunities for minorities is very important. These efforts remove barriers, but changing culture to eliminate distrust and hatred based on a person's skin color, that's critically important. That's how we change history. I know I'm not smart enough or scholarly enough to cure the root cause of the problem myself, but we've brought together a really smart, experienced, wise group of people who, working collaboratively, have a chance to make a difference, a real difference. So my charge to you is twofold. First, I hope you'll present the county government with initiatives to advance us in our efforts to attack the symptoms. We must redouble our efforts here and now to make sure everyone can reach their full potential. In addition, I'd also like you to try to address the causes of racism that have haunted us for centuries. That's really, really, really hard. But if any group can do this, I believe it's you. This is our moment to change our history. This is our obligation to ourselves and to our children. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Executive Budish. I'd now like to go into the new business section of the agenda. I want to do sort of just another welcome and sort of introductions from the council members. So if you could just state your name again for all of us and the organization that you represent, and perhaps you can share why you believe this council's work surrounding the need for equity in Cuyahoga County is important. And I think just based on, I'm trying to figure out the way it would best be suited. Maybe I'll just, if I can, if you can indulge me again, I'll call on you based on how I see you up top. So Yanela, if I can start with you, please.
Hi, my name is Danielle Sims. I am the Ohio State Director for SEIU Local 1. I'm responsible for 5 cities in Ohio: Cleveland, Toledo, Akron, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And I think this council and the work that the council is going to be doing is incredibly important, particularly because our union represents mostly low-wage workers, and oftentimes those are the people of color and women who end up doing these janitorial duties. And those are the folks that are, most greatly affected by income inequality and racism, on the job and in their day-to-day lives. So I'm really excited about the work that we could potentially do here. Hey, Randy.
Thanks very much. Levine, would you unmute yourself?
Hi, good morning. My name is Levine Ross, and I am a policy advisor for County Council. I've been with Council for about 6 years. I've worked with Cuyahoga County government for 22 years. So I've worked at some of the different agencies and have different perspectives in that realm. I also I'm a part-time instructor at Cleveland State University, and I teach in their social work department. I think one of the things concerning for me is because child welfare is a big interest for me. I think the disproportionality of African-American children that are in care has been disproportionate for a very long time. And I think being able to look at that as a major concern within this committee would be gratefully helpful in this area. So I'm just here. I'm grateful to be here to learn with all of the other experts on the panel, and look forward to the work that we are getting ready to do.
Thank you. Janice?
Good morning again, Janice Contreras. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Ohio Hispanic Center for Economic Development. My reason for joining this committee is just a lot of just reflection. Obviously, my organization's mission is to deal with inequity specifically to the Latino community. So definitely a part of the conversation in racial equity specifically. So it's part of our work. But personally and professionally, I think what George Floyd has taught us, that experience, is that it's all of our problem, right? Like what's happening to the Black community is all of our issue and our problem, and we need to treat it as such. That we can no longer stand idle, that we need to really engage and be active. And so I know as a leader, again, and as a mother and as an individual, it's important that we do that. And we know that this is structural and systemic. And so being on this commission is going to, hopefully what our collective work is going to help us make our county better, our cities better. I was on a call yesterday with Kevin Nowak, and he stated that 44% of Cuyahoga County residents are low income. And that threw me off, because I usually think it's Cleveland, but it's not just a Cleveland issue. Throughout the county, we're dealing with a lot of issues, and obviously they're dealing with housing. So they were talking about, Blacks are 2 times less likely to get a mortgage than a white counterpart. And so those are the kinds of issues that I feel like we need to address at its core, that start with policy, and from every level to the on the ground advocacy to policy changes locally, state and federally, I think is where it needs to be. So looking forward to working with everyone.
Great, thank you. Rabbi?
Hello, I'm honored to be serving with this group. There are so many issues, so I think we're all kind of having a lot of them bounce around in our heads right now. I'm just thinking about, I live in the Sussex area of Shaker Heights. I'm able to walk and drive to the Van Aken district, which is absolutely beautiful, and I've seen evolve through the years. You know, in part due to the county's efforts, I do walk. Over the time I walk by this the RTA, and I notice that everybody who's waiting or coming off of the RTA are people of color for the most part, overwhelmingly. I have the luxury of driving to the Van Aken district. I have the luxury of driving from where I live in Shaker Heights to Fairmount Temple, which takes me about 10 to 15 minutes. But if I took public transportation, I think it would take me about at least an hour, maybe even longer. And I wouldn't even be able to take, I think I would have to take at least 2 pieces of transportation. So that's a reminder every day when I take my little walk that there's a level of privilege that you know I have that many do not. And you know, if you just scratch beneath the surface, what is it like to be someone who doesn't have access to public transportation in the ways that many of us do? And what are those obstacles? And perhaps how can we make it easier for folks to work in areas where they don't live, and make it easier for them to get to those places?
Thank you. Victor?
Good morning, everyone. Victor Ruiz with Esperanza. I'm honored to be part of this group, and I feel optimistic that we've elevated it to this point with this sense of urgency. And, you know, similar to what Janice said, I know that as a Latino, I cannot thrive, I cannot be free until Black lives thrive and are free. And as the son of Afro-Boricua woman, and seeing the devastating impact that racism within our community has had on her life and my aunt's, you know, it's just something that it's a life's work. So I'm just honored to be here, and I'm grateful to do this work with all of you.
Thank you. Habiba?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Habiba Rashid Grimes. I'm the CEO of Positive Education Program. We're a child-serving mental health organization that also provides special education services. In service to that, I feel grateful to be part of, and humbled and honored to be part of this work because of the cross-system impacts that racism has on the lives of young people. I think of it as causing as well as creating the conditions for suffering that we see in the population of youth we serve. The predominant demographic for those youth are Black boys. That said, this is personal to me. I am raising 2 Black boys myself and have witnessed throughout my lifetime the transgenerational and traumatizing effects of racism on the lives of people that I love deeply. And I want to be part of making a difference for my community and for our youth, especially. And I have interest in partnering with this commission in taking action that is meaningful now. But the work of addressing root causes will be likely lifetime work.
Thank you. Dr. Gullett?
Thank you so much. I'm, like others have said, so grateful and humbled to be part of this group. I'm a family and public health physician. My clinical practice is at Neighborhood Family Practice, and most of my career, 16 years, has been in community health centers. And I also am at CASE, but am the medical director as well for Cuyahoga County Board of Health. So I sit with one foot in the public health world and one foot in the clinical care world. And I'm deeply concerned about all the issues that we discussed at our last meeting with council. And they're all intimately tied to health. But I'm really trying to understand how we can catalyze systems change. We do a lot of amazing programming and important addressing downstream fallout from racism, but I'm really interested in how this group can target the system and transform the system. And that includes tackling our healthcare and public health systems and the structural racism that they perpetuate. And so those are difficult conversations, but they must be had from my perspective as a healthcare provider and clinician. So I'm just grateful to be on this journey with all of you, and hoping that we can get to know each other better so that we can be more effective as a team. So thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland. It's pretty exciting to be here and at my intersecting identities around being a woman, being a lesbian, being Black, and being at a place where I can do what I'm assuming is this kind of work, where we're going a lot deeper. I'm interested in being the best. I'm a born and raised Clevelander. I believe in Cuyahoga County and the great state of Cuyahoga. I like to lovingly call it as large as it is, and with all the large problems. And I feel like there are enough people around the table. We've been hearing about this and seeing the implications and the impact of anti-Black racism specifically and oppression for years. And I'm super excited to be at a place where it feels like we're going to do some deeper work. We're really addressing anti-Black racism. We know what the impact has been. And so what are we going to do to change that? I'm interested in leadership development and looking at that across our systems and how that manifests in more oppression and lack of growth and expansion and opportunity and access for Black and brown people. And so, I'm hoping to bring the perspective of my intersecting identities as a Clevelander, as a mom, as someone who is a part of a vibrant LGBTQ community, and one that, also is challenged around anti-Black racism and what happens to who gets attention and who doesn't. So I don't want to be a part of the very thing I'm against in other systems. And so I'm getting to the core of it with doing work with you all is super exciting. And I hope I'm ready. I am ready. I'm ready.
I believe you're ready. Stephen?
Yes, good morning. Stephen Cavanis. I'm a director with Team NEO, Director of Project Management. I'm just greatly appreciative to really be part of this process, this group of distinguished leaders in our community. There's so many things that, run through my mind when I think about this work. Professionally, I see how often, minorities, for instance, women, entrepreneurs just have more barriers, right, to achieve growth, have access to resources. Personally, this work is close to me because, and it's emotional. You can't really dig into this work without emotion. I think that all of us are here to create impactful change, be objective, but there's a lot of things that will be rehashed in our conversations as we reflect on lives lost through the many years of these issues, and now because of the pandemic, because of George Floyd, have really sort of risen to the top of the fold. And I hope that with this work, we really can, me in particular, really get involved in some of the active change that's going to take place throughout this process. But again, appreciative and thank you, and looking forward to work.
Thank you. India.
Good morning. India Pierce-Lee, Senior Vice President of Program at the Cleveland Foundation. First of all, I want to commend the county and County Executive Budish for putting this group together. I think this is a vitally important issue at this time. It's been important, but to really begin to take action, and I'm honored to, serve with the rest of you. Especially working at the foundation, all the issues that this group is looking at, we deal with day to day with many of the nonprofit organizations and partners. And one of the things we keep trying to find ways to deal with all the issues that face our citizens day to day. But until we deal with the real systems that are keeping us from really breaking through the ecosystems that affect our individuals, which is the structural racism, we'll continue to just keep perpetuating the same thing. So I'm, deeply honored and looking forward to how we as a collective body and with others can look at the policies and changes and set a framework and a template for others to follow throughout not only this county, but throughout the nation as we do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy?
Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to serve with such an august group, and I know the great work of so many of you and respect what you've done for our city and our county. My name is Randall McShepard. I am Vice President of Public Affairs for RPM International, which is a global chemical coatings company headquartered in Medina, Ohio. In terms of, I'm also Chief Talent Officer here. I do this work or take on this, the work of this task force for a number of reasons. First of all, I would say my lived experience as an African-American male and a lifelong Clevelander, a graduate of the municipal school district, someone who has seen probably more than I would have cared to in terms of just decades of despair and so many of the topics that are outlined in the very legislation that is before us for this particular project. I would say that I came to the conclusion some years ago that a great amount of the work that needs to happen to address these challenges has to do with public policy, which is why I co-founded a public policy think tank called Policy Bridge, and we've been really looking at some of those systems and structures that India mentioned and ways that we might inform governmental entities, policymakers, et cetera, on what they might be able to do to mitigate and address some of these challenges. I do believe that we have to get to a point of being uncomfortable with very delicate, challenging discussions if we're ever going to move the needle. And to that point, I hope that the county executive maybe says something. I just a couple of days ago discovered that there's an issue with the senior county official with blackface. That was very disheartening. Before we even had our first meeting, I'm reading about a senior county executive dealing with the blackface issue. These are the kinds of issues that we have to really take on head on and have honest, open conversations about how comfortable we are, how embedded those kinds of, to use the executive's terms, attitudes and beliefs might be in the work of all aspects of county government. So I just hope we're ready to fasten our seatbelts and have some serious conversations, because I personally am tired of the decades of despair and hope that we can get to a place where we really can move the needle and improve the quality of life for so many of our fellow county residents that so desperately need us to lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Marcia?
Good morning. Thank you. So Marcia Maccabee, President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Cleveland, where clearly, unapologetically, we are in the business of empowering communities and changing lives on behalf of the African American community. And many of my colleagues have already stated many of the reasons why I am committed to this work beyond my day-to-day work at the Urban League, but there are just a few things that I'd like to add here. I think that it's going to take courage in this work. And I am excited about the people that I see on this council who I know have demonstrated a lot of courage in work on behalf of this community. So I'm happy to be joining with that. We're going to, as people talked about, having honest dialogue and conversations. We're going to have to call for action and commitment to have institutions hold up mirrors to their organizations for internal reflection. And then after that, we're going to have to help to build collective courage for folks across all pillars within the community to embark on a journey of shared transformation. Public policy is one area, hiring practices, practices within organizations. There will be layers of work that are going to have to occur in order to dismantle the institutional racism that occurs. And so we're going to have to stay the course and understand this didn't happen in a moment. It won't change in a moment. And we just have to keep on course. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie?
Good morning. Thank you, Naila. Good morning to everyone. Eddie Taylor, the owner of Taylor Oswald, and a couple of roles as we all do in the community. One is as the current chair of University Hospital's Cleveland Medical Center. One of my reasons for engaging in this work is, all too often now we hear about the social determinants of health, and we get to see it up close as a volunteer in a major healthcare institution. It brings to light so many things that need to be corrected, should be corrected. And while efforts are underway, we know that there's much work to do. The other role for me is as the current chairman of the President's Council. Most of you know it's an organization in terms of the LLC owned by African-American business owners. We just finished a board meeting for our foundation within the last 40 minutes or so. And one of the things that always comes shining through is that although this area has 20-some thousand vendors licenses for African Americans, only 800 plus of those businesses have a W-2 employee. And if we can somehow change from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a business ownership standpoint, from a wealth creation standpoint, that part of the equation, how much further ahead would we be? So finding ways to make sure that not only are the health determinants taken care of, but how we live and thrive in this area from an entrepreneurial and economic standpoint is also critical. So how we affect and discuss and change those outcomes, I believe, will be critical amongst all the other things that we've heard. But I find those areas of deep and great concern for me.
Thank you. Danielle?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Sydnor. I'm president for the Cleveland branch of the NAACP, and I'm also the CEO of We Win Strategies Group. I'm happy to be a part of the committee and just really believe that the work is important. It's long overdue. I'm excited to see the county take a leadership role on this, but I think the work and what comes out of this committee will demonstrate whether or not these activities become ceremonial or if they actually lead to change. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Reverend Chalker? Good morning. If you could unmute yourself. There you go.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry for my difficulty getting into the meeting today. It's a great privilege to be a part of this important group. I have spent 32 years as a pastor in the urban core of Cleveland. And from that position and that situation, one of the comments that was always so hurtful to me is that people in the outer ring suburbs would invite me to come and speak, and they'd always say something like this: boy, we think you're doing a great job down there with those people. I really would like to create, as I've tried to for years, climates where there's not the attitude of those people. It's we the people. We're all part of each other. How can we not fear each other, but join together in important things? And that's a critical thing that I'm looking forward to having insights from this group. The other thing is that I serve now on the board of the Children and Family Advocates of Cuyahoga County, which is associated with the Justice Department. And we have over 3,000 kids in the Juvenile Justice Department. And 97% of those kids are non-white. And the inequities of service, the inequities of relationships that matter and trying to involve volunteers to help it is so overwhelming. And it's an inequity with which we must deal. Anyway, I'm very glad to be here. And thank God I got the technology right.
And thank you. And I do apologize. I know we had some difficulties earlier with the Zoom meeting, so I apologize for that, but happy we're all here now. I believe I've gotten everyone, although I do see perhaps there's some people on the phone that I don't have a photo of. So have I missed any of the council members? If so, if you could just unmute yourself and chime in. Okay, with that, I'm going to assume that I didn't, and I'm going to move forth with the agenda. Next, as you all know from all of the work you've done in the community and your professional lives, as a new council, we really have to discuss the governance of this council. And what I mean by governance is the sort of the bylaws, the chair people, our procedures, etc. And we're very fortunate, the county law director has given us or assigned, or whatever the verb is you want to put, one of his assistant law directors who has not only experience in this area, but also the passion to assist in this work. And she has agreed, obviously, to serve as the board's legal counsel. So I want to introduce her. Her name is Awadif Assad. She has joined us on the Zoom council, and she's going to speak a little bit as to her role and how she can be helpful in sort of coming together with the bylaws, subcommittees, chairpersons for the committee, etc. So Awadif, if you can unmute yourself, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and congratulations to our new council members for your appointment to this very important commission. For those of you whom I have not yet met, I am Awadif Assad, currently the risk manager for Cuyahoga County and formerly a litigator with the civil litigation section of the law department. Advancing diversity and inclusion and equity have been important issues for me. When everyone is treated equally and equitably, we all thrive. I currently serve as the vice chair of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and I am a member of the Ohio State Bar Association Advisory Council on Diversity Issues. I also addressed issues of systematic racism with my fellow Leadership Cleveland 2020 classmate, Habiba Grimes. I helped draft the county's non-discrimination legislation, which established the county's Human Rights Commission. I am grateful to Armand and the county in passing this historic legislation. I believe this experience will assist here in defining the structure of this council. I have looked at a number of other equity councils and commissions, and I believe there is a lot for us to draw from in terms of best practices. One of the governing models you may want to consider is an executive committee framework that includes a chair and possibly a co-chair and a vice chair. We can also set up subcommittees to focus on specific areas, as you all mentioned today. There are so many areas that we need to delve into, such as education, housing, employment, transportation, and healthcare. Assuming this is okay with all of you, we will draft bylaws consistent with this format and then circulate a draft for your review and consideration. And thank you. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Awadif. So at this point, I'd really turn it over to you all and see what sort of framework you are interested in having. That's one that Awadif suggested. We're not tied to it. It's really your decision on how you think you would like to proceed. Obviously, I would agree for what it's worth that I think a chair and perhaps a vice chair, or at least a chair, is important. When we delve into the next section of the agenda, the scope of work and priorities, you may want to consider subcommittees, but what are some initial thoughts from the council members on this point? And if you could just, I guess, unmute yourself and start talking, it probably is the best way to do it.
Can I start, if the county executive wouldn't mind? What do you see as the very best outcomes of this work, county executive, in terms of a report? Not that we're trying to predict the findings, but if you, when this is said and done, or at some interval, what are you hoping is accomplished by this group? Not only the pace of the work, but some of what we see as fruitful outcomes.
Well, it's, legislation set up a report at the end of the year to the council and to the administration. I don't believe that has to be your final report. I don't believe that the work has to be totally concluded by the end of the year. I echo what a couple of you have said, which is urgency. I have a sense of urgency. I know county council has a sense of urgency here, and I can tell many of you all of you have a sense of urgency as well. So I think it's important that you get into the work quickly and that we move as quickly as we can here. As I said in my initial remarks, I think I'm hoping that some of the things that can be done quickly you would propose. As I said, we've been focused on all different areas. The county touches everything. So in terms of what we are capable of doing, it's quite broad. It can be supporting entrepreneurs. It can be helping out with education. It can be workforce training. It can be criminal justice. I know some of you talked about that in your initial interviews. So really, it's what you all want to get done. My biggest request is that you do it as quickly as you can. We have things going on right now that need your assistance, need your input, need your wise counsel, and we're looking forward to that. As I said, I see it as work that can be specific initiatives like the support for minority business owners. I characterize that as a symptom or impact, effect, addressing an effect of racism. That's one piece. But if we're talking about getting deeper, and I'd like you to do that if you can, figuring out how we can how we can change the culture. This is, Randy mentioned, he's tired of, seeing what happens year after year after year. And the best way to really have an impact is changing the culture. I don't know how to do that, but I'm hoping we can figure that out.
Eddie, this is Naila again, and I can perhaps also give a little bit more flavor around the specific question about the report, which is I had later in the agenda. But according to the resolution that established this council and the charter codifying it, the duties of this council include providing a semi-annual report of your recommendations for policies and programs, that including information that's collected from the public regarding equity. And this report has to be provided by the executive to the executive and council. But additionally, the other resolution that I've sent to you all in advance of this meeting, the resolution declaring racism a public health crisis, requires this council to issue a status report no later than December 31st of every year. So it's almost like there's two different, you probably observed that from the pieces of the pre-read or the pieces of legislation I sent you, there's really two different goals. We may want to discuss, and again, it's your decision, that report that has to be provided by December 31st. That may also be able to function as the semi-annual report for this first year, and then think about how we want to do that later. And I was going to bring that up towards the end of the agenda just to sort of put on your radar for the next meeting, but we can feel free to discuss it now. And then I think in a little bit, we'll sort of try to narrow in some of the focuses and goals of the council, if that makes sense. Does that help also, Eddie?
It makes perfect sense, and I don't want to get ahead of your agenda, so I'll answer at least your question from my perspective. Given the pace, given the need for the reports and the interim projects, this urgency that so many of us spoke of, and the need for the now, I would suggest, yeah, we should have a structure as recommended that includes some leadership, right? We're a leader amongst leaders. So there's an equality, obviously, amongst us all, and everyone will have an opportunity to step up and lead in the area that they are comfortable with or feel the most urgency around. But yeah, we should have a structure that allows for someone to be a sort of the linchpin, if you will, to the conversations that might flow. So I would be okay with that as a suggestion.
It sounds good. And it also sounds, if I'm hearing you, Eddie, and not to put words in your mouth, but you may also just right now talking about the breadth of the work may be in favor of sort of subcommittees with the sort of mini leaders and chairs of those subcommittees, maybe reporting back out to the whole council or something like that, or no?
100%. 100%. I think to divide this work is the smart way to go about the work.
Okay. Does anyone else have any? Thank you, Eddie. Any other thoughts, initial thoughts, so we can get a lot of working?
I was going to, I thought a little bit about this and understanding that there's some short-term urgent matters, and then also understanding that this is a 5-year engagement. So a lot of things could happen within 5 years. I think, we need some sort of process in which we could identify what are going to be some categories of priority. What are the things that we want to focus on the short term and long term, and kind of create a work plan around that. And then obviously, to Eddie's point, having, co-chairs based on expertise, interest, passion to then carry that work, because we need to divide and conquer. 15 is not a lot. It's still, I think it's still an intimate group. But I think just having something very set, obviously other factors could happen that come in and we have to address, issues as they come, but definitely just pick, areas in which we feel that we could really make impact. I'm more for less areas, more like targeted focus. Because this group has made it very clear that we want to do, we want to really get to the core, not just, create reports once a year, or obviously we know we have to do that. But the work and how we go about the work is going to be critical. And so to me, again, just some sort of process in which we could identify a few areas of priority that this committee feels, feels like we could be impactful in. And then with guidance from the executive and the council.
Naila, I would just ditto pretty much what Eddie said. I believe that structure works. We've seen it work in other processes and so forth. It's a familiar structure that I don't think we have to do a lot of adjustment to. And I think that really an appropriate scope of work, which will follow after the structure, will ensure that we can get the work done. So that would be my comment.
And Marcia, I agree 100%. And that's why the scope of work is after the governance on the agenda, as you can imagine. So yes. Anyone else want to speak to sort of setting that up or speak to the governance structure?
Naila, I just wanted to make the comment that I think you mentioned that there will be recommendations from the general public coming in. I think that this structure, as we build it, should also entail some outreach by us to the community to get input, and not just wait for people to submit ideas. We need to be hungry and inquisitive and go out and find, all aspects of the county to ensure that we're bringing all those perspectives to the table.
So Randy, to speak to that, and this is why, what's the old adage that great minds think alike, and this is why I'm excited to support the work of this council. That's another item on my agenda to come, sort of how do we want to actively engage members of the community, missing parts. So if I ask you just to hold for a moment, and if we don't cover it, I'll be sure to bring it up, but agree 100%, and that is part of the charge, so yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think at this point, and I'm just going to throw it out, is there anyone who thinks that they would, I don't want to talk about the subcommittees yet because that's going to come in 35 seconds, but is there anyone who would be interested in sort of serving as an overall chair or vice chair of the council?
This is a tricky proposition, quite honestly, for all of us. I will say that, and I'm just being honest, I, in these discussions, had a brief conversation with the county executive, and look, I'm happy if anyone decides to do it, but just because of momentum and things that are going on in my civic life and the places where I'm contributing, I have no issue if other folks see fit to take it. In my view, it's a sub-leadership role. It's just a way to corral things, but to step in if there are no concerns. So it's tricky, right, to throw yourself into the mix like this, but I'm just speaking really from some conversations I've had along the way on the subject.
All in favor?
Eddie, so you know, and I've known you for a very long time, and Armin has asked me to serve in the role. And if you were, or anyone on this council were to step in and be the chair, please know that you have my full support. And by extension, that means my telling Armin, you have Armin's full support and the resources of the county behind you. So, and I'm saying that publicly with Armin on the call, so he realized that means his full support as well.
Okay.
So is there any, does anyone not want Eddie to step up, as crazy as that sounds, or would anyone else like to co-chair or anything? Okay. So Eddie, it looks like you and others, I'm going to see if we can get others to step up for sort of some subcommittee.
And we will find a co-chair. Yes.
Okay, we will find a co-chair. Fair. Awadif, if you can, it sounds like what I'm hearing from the members on the council is that they would like some bylaws or some governance documents set up that does speak to a chair and sort of co-chair structure, as well as some subcommittees. So if you could work on that, that would be great. And we again thank you, and thank you for agreeing to serve as legal counsel to this committee. I will try to remember my place and not be the lawyer that I am, and defer to you on that. I'd like to now just move us, and again, thank you for your time, to move us into sort of the scope and work and priorities. In the pre-reading that you all received from me, it had the ordinance that established this council and set forth the duties. I also sent, obviously, the chapter of the Cuyahoga County Charter that codified this Citizens Advisory Group. But I also sent, because we have to keep that ordinance in conjunction with the ordinance declaring racism a public health crisis in the county. And Section 3 of that ordinance charges the council with reviewing, focusing on, and providing recommendations to reduce disparity between Black and white people in regards to healthcare, specifically child welfare, suicide rates, and life expectancy, criminal justice system, access to healthy foods, safe and affordable housing, well-paying jobs and economic opportunity, quality transportation, educational opportunities, safe places to be active. I also took the time prior to this meeting to review when each of you were before county council for your confirmation to serve on this council. And the top 5 areas that you seem to all want to talk about were economic equity, healthcare, juvenile adult justice systems, county policy, and procurement. So I want to know, with all of those, and I know that was a handful being out there, is there anything else that you think we're missing from that pretty exhaustive list? Are there any other gaps that I have not mentioned where you think is a specific area of focus that the council should focus its work on?
Can you repeat those five, Nayla, please?
Sure. The five that from you all, it was economic equity. Actually, 8 of you mentioned that. 4 of you mentioned healthcare. 4 of you also mentioned juvenile and adult justice system. And 3 of you mentioned county policy. And 3 of you mentioned procurement. Sorry, New York accent. I just want to know if anybody thinks something's missing. And the others, the A through H is outlined for all of you in the resolution declaring racism a public health crisis, which is the R 2020-0122. And it's A through H. So maybe we can have a little bit of discussion on that. Anything we're missing? Anybody can think of another area of specific, really, urgency or desire?
So I just wanted to bring something up to the group about the big picture. So clearly we're all very focused on action and moving quickly. But one thing I don't want to lose sight of is how complex and interconnected all of these issues are, and that there's a big system that is perpetuating structural racism and the inequities that we see in these downstream effects in all of the places you just described that we put in our testimony. And I wonder if there is a role for us to spend a couple hours together really deeply considering what a systems model of structural racism looks like in Cuyahoga County. And I'm not trying to get theoretical, I'm not trying to get academic, but I do think that having a systems map or a systems model to understand the interconnected pieces of this, because when we focus on one piece, it's going to affect other pieces. And having just a big picture view of that, I think could be very effective and powerful for this group. But it would require us spending a bit of time together, probably in short order in the next few weeks or month, really creating that. And so I just want to throw that out there as something to consider. I'm all for the things we've talked about in our testimony and today, but I don't want to lose the big picture, because ultimately this is about impacting systems and structures, and we can do that in each of these areas. But that interconnected piece is something that we've got to stay in tune to.
Thank you. Thoughts, folk?
My view is anytime we can engage in systems thinking, the better off we are. There are levers that affect one to the next part. So if we can get there in a 2-hour discussion, absolutely, because this thing is so multidimensional. I believe if we have a bigger, global, more systematic approach to it, the better off we are. So I concur with the thinking. If we can get there quickly enough, I'd be all for it, quite honestly.
This is Phyllis. I agree too. For those of us also, like if there's any folks like me who are more visual learners, as you were describing it, I was seeing it based on what I'm reading here. And I think it's also a helpful tool when you are for transparency, because it's something that we can show and share with the broader community and ask, what's missing, where are blind spots.
I'm in agreement as well. And I guess it might beg the question, would there be somebody in our community who could lead us through a process, whatever that might be, as you said, Heidi, like a hour to 2-hour process where we can maybe map out the systemic racism piece, somebody who could really chart it out with us. It just would give us food for thought. And it's so tempting to start jumping into an issue area right now. It's certainly going to require a lot of research on our part, but probably some ivory tower thinking, which often gets a bad name. It might not be a bad idea just at the beginning, just to see it from 20,000 feet, and then to be able to drill down. It's a tightrope we're walking, because we do feel the time press and we do feel the urgency. But I'm with you, Heidi and Eddie. I think if we could figure out a good person who is really in the mix here racially, and could give us a sense of big picture view of all of the intricacies, how systemic racism really plots itself out. That would be really helpful to me.
Could we, I certainly agree with what is being said. Can you hear me? It's Ken Chalker again.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. What about attempts at this that have been done across the decades? What reports or materials might there already be in existence that may be on a shelf somewhere that we ought to take a look at again? For instance, years ago, Anthony Pillow, when he was Bishop of Cleveland for the Roman Catholic Diocese, went through as an extensive study that produced a document called The Church in the City. While that reflects a faith-based organization, I understand, the perspective, however, of neighborhoods and needs and how they might be addressed would be contained in that document that might be one resource to take a look at as we begin this important study or important work of knowing our place in it and how to do a job well. And I'm just suggesting that we not try and reinvent a wheel. Let's see what's out there that's been very, very helpful and productive that may have gone by the wayside or not been recognized as appropriately as it should have been.
And you said that document is called Church in the City?
Yeah, the Church in the City, and it addresses the entire scope of the diocese in terms of how it would respond to these kinds of issues, I believe, as neighborhoods and as different suburban groups, and how people could work as a whole. I'm not suggesting it has the answers. I'm saying it's one document. I know there would be others where those kinds of studies and questions have been asked.
Well, I will attempt to have someone do some research and see if I can find a copy of the document and circulate it to the group as soon as possible.
If I might speak, I think that the suggestions are very, I mean, this is exciting. This is why I get so excited every time that's why I wanted to be on this call. You know, you're all, you have so much to offer here, both in terms of substance and procedure. I agree. You know, there's this sort of thing that we're doing here is being duplicated around the country right now. There are lots of efforts to address structural racism. And as Reverend Chalker mentioned, I don't know that we have to totally reinvent the wheel. I think a good starting point would be to get as much background as to what's going on, what has been done in recent months and years, but what is going on currently around the country would be helpful to help guide this group. I also like the idea of outreach to the community. You know, I think it could be very beneficial, for example, to do one or more town halls that this group would conduct, open it up to the community, get suggestions from people around the county as to where they would like to see you all take this. So I do think that there's a lot that can be done. I liked Dr. Gullett's suggestion to get somebody to help us, you know, build I don't know what the title is or what the right approach is, but when we've done internal strategic planning, we as the county government brought in somebody from the outside to help lead it, to help us put together a plan for the strategic plan, and somebody who can help draw out in an organized way from the members here might be very helpful too. So all of those ideas are good, and I think you know would be worth considering. And again, if it requires some resources from the county, we're in this. So, you know, let us know.
I would agree with all the comments that have been made. And I was thinking when Eddie asked the earlier question of the executive about what might be the outcomes, we might also build this in a way that would include logic models to sort of look at what the ultimate outcomes might look like once we all sort of weigh in and learn from county officials, the current state of all the different programs and initiatives and departments. And I think that would be very helpful. But I do want to Attorney Byrd's point, add one potential addition or additional area of focus for the group's consideration. I think the 5 that you pointed to are all very good and certainly gets us started, but I wouldn't want to let go the safe spaces to be active. And I would add to that, to be active and thrive, because I think about, obviously the county and the city were involved in, as an example, the Cleveland Tree Coalition, where there was a goal to plant trees. But you ride through some parts of the city and some suburbs, and just the appearance of those places are not the kinds of things, not just in terms of being active, but just being a productive citizen. There's a certain sense of dignity that you want to experience when you walk outside your house and walk around the block and, do whatever it is you want to do in your community. And many and more quiet suburban communities enjoy that. Unfortunately, many don't have those kinds of opportunities. So I think we should be looking at safe spaces to be active and thrive. And I think that also extends the net quite a bit in terms of all the folks that we would be impacting throughout the county. You can agree or disagree with that, just one man's opinion.
I do want to I remember Councilwoman Simon's comment on environmental justice. And so I don't know if, safe spaces can sort of be a part of that piece of work, that scope of work, because I think there's a lot of connection there. So I don't know. That's my thought.
Any others?
I just wanted to follow up on the systems thinking piece. So through our HIP Cuyahoga work for the Community Health Improvement Plan, we were recently funded by Robert Wood Johnson to do systems mapping of structural racism for Cuyahoga County. And so we were able to actually not only get that, but to convince the person who is sort of an international expert in systems mapping, particularly has done a ton of work around racism in St. Louis, to move to Cleveland. And he just got here like 4 weeks ago, but is really interested in plugging in. And so I just wanted this group to know that if I intentionally didn't lead with that, because if it wasn't something this group wanted, I didn't want to, steer us in that direction, but to answer, are there folks who at least have the content or the process expertise to facilitate, which sometimes is helpful to have somebody who really doesn't know the intricacies of our community yet, but who can walk us through kind of that mapping. So we certainly not, pressured to do that, but I want you to know that that is available, and he's available to us for that. I spent the day working with him yesterday on systems mapping around structural racism in health departments. And it was a very interesting process. So it's there as a resource if we choose to use it, but just wanted you to know that.
That's helpful, Heidi. And so he would be a resource where you believe he would be able to come in and sort of speak to this group and help us if we could block some time and get this.
Yeah, I know he would do, if we choose to use him, and I'll send you the information for the group, but I know that he would spend the couple hours this group would need, maybe probably twice, 2 to 3 hours a piece, twice, to create a comprehensive system map that would identify lever points at different time horizons. So short term in these areas we're talking about, but then intermediate and longer term, kind of getting at what Randy was talking about with understanding this. And part of the challenge here is that we can't really envision all that could be, because we're still dealing with systems and structures that are oppressive and inflicting structural violence. Yet if we're able to think about where some of those lever points are, then over time, we may be able to find new ways to work together. But that's that systems thinking piece that Eddie was talking about earlier. So it's there if we decide.
How do other? Please.
Could I one more place that we might investigate to see what already may be in process or that work with this all the time? The Diversity Center of Cuyahoga County or the Greater Cleveland area does this all the time. They're in the various school systems with diversity training and awareness. They've dealt with the Cleveland Police Department. And I know they have access, but not just that, they've got expertise in how they have been going about this and what's been working or not working, and also some overarching system study that directs their efforts. And that might be another resource just to take a look at and see if it could be helpful.
I have a few general comments. One, I'm really supportive of the systems mapping process, and then perhaps further setting up our structure after we get a sense of the systems map, maybe our committees, because there's so many specific issues that we can identify that there's so many of them. How do we elevate that? So I'm really excited about the potential of a systems mapping process to help set the course of our work. The other thing, last week I met with a young citizen of Cuyahoga County. She reached out to me to really talk about this committee and its future work. One, she wanted to make sure we didn't forget to engage youth voice in this process. And the other piece was to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes we've been making in the past. So using the same structures that have really gotten us nowhere. So as we look at who we're going to work with and how we're going to work, let's take our time to make sure that we're not repeating the mistakes of the past, and that we're looking at new ways of doing this work. Thank you.
Victor, I want to just.
Who is talking?
This is Habiba Grimes. I just want to take this moment to chime in here as well. Fully in support of all that's been discussed as to structure and the need to look at this as a systems problem and take a systems approach. But I also think we can't legislate changes in heart and mind. We can't create policies that change hearts and minds. And so how do we build that work into the foundational work that's necessary for us to proceed? How do we engage members of the community who either lack time, energy, hope, or will to engage and declare very explicitly and repeatedly the intentions of this work and the necessity of this work? I look at national, local efforts to dismantle racism, to interrupt its harm, and we can see how adversaries to equity can organize themselves to undo the work that is attempted. And so how do we get out ahead of that if possible?
And I was just going to add that if this group is interested in involving the Diversity Center, I did get a call this week from the director who expressed strong interest in providing whatever help they can, getting as involved as this group would like in the processes.
Any other comments? So to sort of just regroup and summarize, it seems like what I'm hearing is that there is an overwhelming desire from the council to sort of have a person come in and maybe facilitate a discussion around systems mapping. And we could speak to, obviously, the Diversity Center. I believe that's Peggy Zone Fisher, is that the Diversity Center? Or we could also engage the person that Heidi suggested to come in, which could be interesting as well, since that may be a newer look with someone, someone coming in with that expertise. So that's really a decision for you all to make, and I will obviously facilitate whichever way you decide to go. So, and also, I will also, as I promised earlier, do the research to try to get the document for your review that the Reverend suggested. So if I'm hearing that correct, I think we just need to decide which one we want to pursue.
Heidi, I have a question. What was the gentleman's name that you mentioned?
Robert Johnson.
It's Peter Hovman is the guy's name. Let me put it in the chat. The work that we are funded to do is for the Health Improvement Partnership Cuyahoga, which is the Cuyahoga County Community Health Improvement Plan. And our most recent assessment concluded last October and was released, and the plan is to be released this year. But in 2015 and again this past year, eliminating structural racism is the key priority of the improvement plan. And so that set us up, Greg Brown and myself and our teams in HIP Cuyahoga, to apply for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funding to create a systems mapping to identify these leverage points. But I just wanted to present it to this group because it's already funded and it's really perfectly aligned with sort of what we're talking about. I just, don't want us to feel like we have to use this particular person. He's actually really well known internationally for community-based system dynamics, which is basically engaging communities in sharing their lived experience to create systems models that then allow you to figure out where your most effective leverage points will be. So he's really interesting in the way that he can bring together like theory and models with actually community lived experience. And he is trained as both an engineer and a social worker. So I think that gives some perspective. But he has been in St. Louis for many years and worked on quite a few initiatives around racism, both at the organizational and community level, as well as individual bias pieces. So I'm not trying to sell him in any way, just giving you some of his background. I don't care who does it. I just feel like having a systems approach is helpful for us to be guided.
Yeah, I echo Heidi's sentiment too on having somebody from the outside that's just recently becoming acquainted versus folks that have probably done this a couple times with different groups in different types of ways, which I feel would be what we would get from the Diversity Center without offending anybody. The fresh perspective, I think, would be more objective, and we need some of that objectivity. My English is a second language here. To be able to proceed in the work that we're doing. And specifically, if he's already doing that work in healthcare, which is one of our top areas, then it's just expanding on the work that he's already doing in a little bit more macro level on systems within Cuyahoga County. So my thoughts.
So go ahead, please, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. So I would love to have Peter facilitate. I think that if the Diversity Center does have materials or studies that they've completed recently, I think I would be open to at least reviewing it. So I don't want to, say no, but I certainly think that engaging with Peter is a good next step.
And I think also if we do, or if you all decide to engage Peter, as you're saying, Stephen, there may be another opportunity for the Diversity Center to still come and present or something else, just not necessarily on the sort of systems work. So that's also just to keep in the back of your mind. There may be another role if you all decide that we want the Diversity Center to play.
So I believe Heidi's done a great job of selling, even though you said you weren't trying to sell Peter, Heidi. So good job there. But I'm in agreement with what was just said. We have to find a way, whatever it looks like, to have Peggy and the Diversity Center, in my view, local matters in a lot of ways. And Peggy has worked really hard at this over the course of time. Whether that organization is the best expertise for this particular moment is important, but not completely material. I think we need that local connection as well. So whether it's prior resources or some input, I'd hope that we can find a way.
Yeah, Eddie, I agree. I think we should just probably create a process to engage multiple local institutions, because there are many doing this type of work. And I think part of what we want to do is just make sure we're inclusive of everyone in this county. So I think that could be part of our work, is how do we bring in outside organizations? And I do support us further discussing Peter's work.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that. You know, kind of looking at Peter and seeing how we can engage him and utilize his expertise in this. But I want to be cautious that we don't spend so much time. I mean, I agree that we need to have like a foundation to work from, but you know, oftentimes these things turn into like the research and all of the prep work, and then the actual work gets lost behind that. So the recommendations are great, and I do agree, but I think we need to be mindful of the timelines and making sure that that prep work doesn't kind of spill over into a loop where we're not actually getting anything done.
So if we're going to hold ourselves to these timeframes, I mean, this sounds like a decision and work that's begun, if not just before, it's just after Labor Day, quite honestly, so that we can keep ourselves on schedule. So, because I'm with you, right? We can get lost in the process.
Nayla, in case you didn't notice, I think Sheila Wright has just signed on, so I want to note that to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Armin. Hi, Sheila, and welcome. And I can talk to you offline and bring you up to speed on what we've covered if you like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think from what I'm hearing again, and I don't want to misspeak, that the next step is sort of to work, or I will work with Heidi directly and try to set up a mutually convenient time to have Peter come in and sort of speak to us. And as Eddie suggested, either right before or right after Labor Day as the next step. Well, I'll also look to you all. I mean, we've suggested the Diversity Center and Peggy, but perhaps, as Victor mentioned, there are other organizations that are working in the space, or as I like to say, sort of tolling in these vineyards and have done so for years, that we also would like to invite in to speak to us, whether it's, as Armin suggested, sort of at a town hall or just do a formal presentation. So obviously I will help with coordinating that if you all decide who else you would like to come in. Does that make sense? Or is that, am I getting what those next steps are that you all are looking for?
Nayla, there's been some exchange on the chat that maybe a small group could, with Eddie leading that charge, maybe just do like a reconnaissance mission, so to speak, to meet with Peter, Nayla, you too, of course, but just to have a sense of at least a micro consensus on behalf of the whole group that this is exactly the way we want to go before actually pulling the trigger and scheduling him with us just yet. But I want to make sure that's right with what the group feels too. That's what I'm reading just in the chat.
Thank you, Josh. And I didn't see that in the chat, so I apologize. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I think that's a great idea. Do you all agree with that idea? I'm going to take silence as acquiescence and say yes, that you all agree.
How about the head nods? Yeah.
Right. Then I'm also going to take so far that Eddie and I, but I'd look for maybe two others, or Eddie, I'll defer to you. How many others would you like to go on our sort of?
Janice raised her hand, and that was a high. near
Hi.
the ceiling, right?
So Janice.
And I think, and Phyllis had recommended it too. So I think we have a group.
Perfect.
Phyllis had made the suggestion first, and I said, sure, happy to help.
And of course, you can put me on the list too, since I know both sides.
Okay. So Janice, Phyllis, Eddie, and I will set up something to speak with Peter and then sort of report back, even if it's via email or somehow to get, if we can't all get together, at least we can give you something in writing if that works for you all. I'm seeing heads nodding, I should say. Okay, I want to be respectful of time. And so I think keeping that in mind, I was going to go into sort of narrowing where we want to focus, but I think it's better if we sort of get this systems presentation. And then after that, we can narrow where our focus will be and perhaps select or people volunteer for subcommittee chairs. Is everyone else in agreement with that? Or is there another suggestion?
Yeah, no, I think that works well. The other thing, I'm gonna mess up your name. Awadi?
Awatif is her name.
How is it?
Awatif.
Awatif. Made a comment earlier about doing some research on how other folks are going about this work. So we've heard a little bit about that. So I would love to hear what other people are doing, just as reference as we go about this work and make it our own. So I think that that for me would be important too.
100%. And that was actually something that I did have that I just didn't get to is, do we want to sort of look at other comparable states, counties, cities throughout our nation? Because this is, for whatever reason that's happened as a country as a whole, become a hotspot right now. And so we do know that lots of other areas have declared racism as a public health crisis, both on the state, national, and local level. So we could sort of try to call some of that information together. I don't know how far along in the process people have gotten or how much of that will be public, but we can certainly take a look at that and report that back out. Okay. I'm just now trying to speed through my agenda. We talked a little bit about drafting. The other thing that I just want to keep in mind, and I'm not going to go into it too much detail, but again, the resolutions that speak to this, the county resolutions and the ordinances and that being codified in the charter that speak to this committee also speaks to the fact that this committee is supposed to act as a resource for information and advice to the Equity Commission and the Human Rights Commission. And just to give you all a little bit of background, the information you received in Ordinance 0212-0014 talked about the creation of the Equity Commission. And that's more of an internal commission with folks within who work for the county. The membership, as laid out in the resolution, it has to have the directors of development, human resources, health and human services, procurement and diversity, public safety and justice services. And they are charged with sort of focusing on internal county issues, including the effectiveness of county programs and initiatives, where I believe what we've heard today from the executive and what I've gathered from your comments, where this council will work, as Randy has said, with the community, or all of you have said, with the community, to look at conditions and causes sort of systematic racism and inequalities with the county, and hopefully provide an action-oriented recommendation as to the ways we can change, not only obviously policies, practices, and procedures, but perhaps it would be great if we could attempt to change people's attitudes about race and equity. But I think, as someone mentioned on the call, changing attitudes may take more than any of our lifetimes, but I think it's good work that needs to start. Also, the Human Rights Commission, that was also created by council and codified in the code. That includes 3 external memberships. You all may know some of these people from the community. Kimberly Barnett Mills. Kimberly is a lawyer in town. She used to be the chief. I've known her because she used to be the chief city prosecutor. I believe she's now with Legal Aid. Tim Downing, I believe I know him as well, I think, and Armin can correct me. He's a partner at Ulmer and Byrne Law Firm. And then there's Todd Masuda, who I don't know. Armin, do you recall who Todd is?
I wish you wouldn't put that to me. I believe he's here also. This is a committee commission that's is hearing complaints, among other things, as to violations of our new LGBTQ protections that we added to the civil rights laws for Cuyahoga County. So that's why it's heavily legal.
So, but I will get you also via email the legislation creating that commission so you can have that for background information as well. And then the last sort of thing, or penultimate thing that I want to talk about, it goes back to what Randy brought up earlier in our discussion, was sort of our communication plan. So the resolution talks about this council providing regular updates to the county executive and county council. And I want to sort of to get folks' thoughts about what does regular mean, or what do you view that? And what forum do you view those updates as being provided? Is that something where you all want to draft something that's given to council? Do you want to appear before council and provide the updates live? And again, how regularly do you want to do that? The legislation doesn't spell that out. So I believe then, again, not being the lawyer, but I would default it to you all coming up with how you define that. So I don't know if you want to spend a few moments and just think about that or give your initial impressions.
My initial impression, and it shouldn't be the chair or co-chair, is that every member of this committee should have, whether it's in this virtual format or if we get back to some normalcy, an opportunity to speak directly to county council. I think delivering a report on behalf of this group by whomever it might be, and we can alternate, doesn't matter, or a few at a time, I think is a wonderful approach to how this work can come to life, quite honestly.
And to piggyback off of that, Eddie, what do you think is regular? Would you say that would be like monthly, every 3 months, or how would you define that? Or
well, I think the group should decide. I don't have any prescription around the time frame, but I would prefer to have the faces of this group in front of, in a direct way, council delivering agreed upon comments. So the interval folks can decide if it's monthly or 4 times a year. You guys tell the group.
I think probably quarterly would be good, just because it gives us more substance to report out. And then obviously we know we have a mid report and end of the year. So just not to make it labor intensive, and between 1 month and another month, we may have some traction, but just to make it more substantive on what we're presenting and discussing with council. My thought.
And for me, it begs the question, how often does this group meet? Because that should determine how often we'd be prepared to present to council or anyone else. I don't know if that's been determined yet. Maybe chairman.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why don't we address that? How often would you all like to meet? I would assume and recommend, because we do want to get this work started and we do have that looming deadline of the end of the year for you all to put together the report, that you'd probably want to meet more frequently in the beginning. But I know people's schedules are really tight. So I will leave that again up to you to tell me, and I can help facilitate scheduling, etc. So I don't know your thoughts. Monthly, and then breaking into subcommittees and having the community meetings and the meeting, if it happens, with Peter as in addition to that, or what are thoughts about that?
Randy, let's hear from you, bud. I mean, you've talked about this, you've done this, others have, but we've got to be kind to everyone's calendar. But
yeah, I think we have to meet monthly, at least for the balance of the year, to have enough, information gathered and time to sort of digest and come up with whatever final product we want to deliver by the end of the year. Maybe going into the next calendar year, we can revisit, what the schedule would look like, but there will need to be some frequency in the short term, in my estimation.
And a monthly, just so we're all clear, I mean, if we include this as our August meeting, that only gives us September, October, November. And remember, the report is due by the end of December. So I just put that out there so you all understand that.
Yeah, we also need to think about, like, what is the expectation of what we're reporting on, right? So I think from our work now to December, we're going to report on structure and planning and where we're going. We're not going to have major findings and recommendations in this short period of time. So I think, you know, like I don't want to feel pressured, even though we know that we have to report, but I think we need to report on wherever we're at that point. And that's, you know, and then we take it from there. And then we do, whether we do quarterly and then the midterm report next year. But just really want to be realistic on the speed. Hopefully we have a lot of great things to report, but you know, we're just getting started and that it takes time. We want it to take as least time as possible. So even though we would have a monthly meeting, as Randy suggested, we're probably having committee meetings or meeting in smaller groups. So I think that's where the real work is going to happen. So I think that, you know, the pace for me is okay, one monthly with the whole group, and then we'll participate in smaller meetings with committees and subgroups.
So if I may, just following on with that line of thinking, would it be helpful if once we determine our timeline for through the end of the year in terms of what we want to accomplish, that the reporting should follow the accomplishment of goals along that timeline? So I don't know that we really want to decide the reporting timeline right now until we're clear about what is it we're going to accomplish between now and December, and then figure out how do we then report on that. Just a thought.
So I guess my point of view is definitely monthly for the larger group. I think that this larger meeting right now, I don't know if I want to consider this the larger, that 1 month. I think I would, you know, suggest having another one at the end of the month, following the smaller group meeting with Peter, just to at least get that systems conversation started, so it doesn't flow into September, because I feel like that could hold up the process. So maybe one more larger meeting in August, and then one every month from there. That's my thought.
And that thought is consistent with what Marshall was saying to some degree. So because we have to have that foundation laid. So I'm with you there. I think we have that meeting after the discussion with Peter, and then we'll figure out a schedule that gives us the right approach to how we finish the year strong. So you guys are in about the same place in terms of that conversation. I'm in agreement.
Eddie, do you have any thoughts about if and how we begin to structure some of the other subcommittees based on the outline that Nayla shared, where there appears to be a lot of interest on the part of the group?
Yeah, my only thought, Randy, is everyone should lead, right? So you're here for that reason. So whether it's the reporting or leading a committee, where you have an interest, if we have to have 2 co-chairs to drive the process, everyone should lead. All the other role is just to facilitate. So that would be my request of everyone. Find a place to lead on this in a subject area, and bring home whatever the conclusions might be. It doesn't, for me at this point, doesn't get more complicated than that, quite honestly.
And again, I would just say that those areas could be, again, from the 5 areas of interest or the 6th one that Randy brought up, as well as the A through H that is outlined in the legislation, since that speaks to what your charge is as well. So just keeping you in line with what the charge is to a certain degree. So just lastly, and again, I think this goes back to something else that was discussed, is if we can spend, and again, I'm trying to be respectful of time and I have about 15 minutes. So if we can spend a couple of minutes on, are there other ways in which this council would like to communicate with the community, the broader community? As I've said, we've set up the email address. Obviously, I will check that regularly. But are there other outreach ways or other things that folks think should happen? I know, Victor, you said you spoke with someone who is sort of from the community interested in this work, but are there other ways or things that you think the council should do to engage that community voice?
Well, let me ask for the county executive and Randy and others who were on the panel at the City Club. Tell us how that went, right? Reception, well, I'm sure the content was great, but how did that whole affair go for you? And do we need those sort of, again, perform differently going forward, but we need those sorts of avenues for communication?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback that we got back was that it was very well attended. Folks participated, folks were interested. I think there on the question and answer period towards the end, there was a lot of conversation around making sure that we're bringing in the voice of communities that might not be represented here. And so how are we going to do that, right? Like what are voices that are not in here? Like we've talked about youth and youth engagement. We've talked about other communities of color that may not be represented on here, seniors, there was just a lot of conversation on how we're bringing those voices into the process. So I think how we communicate out, but then also how we're bringing information in is going to be critical. And I think a lot of that can happen in the subcommittee groups by inviting, the public to participate in that. But that was just kind of my feedback.
The City Club Forum, for those of you who don't know, is, it used to be in person on Fridays, and the switch has been during the pandemic to have it basically virtually. So Dan Malthrup has been sort of hosting different subjects, just like they did in person, and they get the word out, to people, and we had a City Club Forum with Janice and Randy, and let's see who else was on.
India was on there.
India was on, right? And I thought it went very well. I think if that would be a potential way to go. I think a town hall would be another way to go, where we promote it to as many people. Could be through emails, could be through to churches, could be we want to make sure we're getting to people who we want to have the opportunity to get input from. So if we're going to do City Club, I think we'd want to supplement the potential audience by our own activities as well. I'm not sure that the standard City Club audience is exactly who would be valuable for us to get input from, but it would be one audience.
I think to that point, there's also, if you want to talk about, we can also use other media aspects. I don't know if that would be something you would be interested, but perhaps radio, or whether that be Radio 1 or other sort of radio stations that may target certain communities, is what Armin was saying. So just sort of food for thought about that as well.
I have a question. Does the county have an external communications team? And if so, can we tap into them?
Absolutely. And I'm sure they'd be very happy to help in any way you want.
Would you like, just so, Victor, what can I do to help with that? Would you like me to see what sort of avenues they can assist with, or?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I think at this point, when we're ready, obviously, our next step is this mapping conversation. But if we can integrate our work into the county's already existing communication structure, that would probably be the most effective. And we might be able to identify ways in which we can enhance that. But understanding what they're capable of doing is probably a good first step.
I would also just include in the outreach, it's a kind of a sort of an in-reach with our council staff. And I know that was something that was actually pointed out in the materials. That was one of the reasons I was so impressed with this effort is, Armin, you've looked to your staff, to council, and you're asking yourself, what can we do differently? What can we do better? What are we missing perhaps even like where are our blind spots. So in our outreach, I would just want to make sure that we don't, ignore the obvious, which is just doing some kind of discernment about how the county works. What are the blind spots? I think we all have them. Every organization does. Perhaps one of the committees, the subcommittees, could be devoted to having some conversations and discussions about that, and where those who work in the county would like to go. What are we missing? Those kinds of things.
Are you suggesting we're not doing a perfect job?
Yeah.
Just joking. No, I think that's very important. That's one of the things I want this group to help us with is, obviously, we can do a lot more, we can do better, and we want to hear that. That's the best way to learn.
I just wanted to chime in to say, to Nayla's earlier point, I love the fact that you even mentioned radio, because as I see it, we have a couple of things we're battling with right now in Cuyahoga County. One, you have a terrible digital divide, right? So a lot of folks won't be privy to these kinds of gatherings and convenings. Secondly, even with COVID, you can't necessarily have a community forum in the way that you would, or gather folks at a church or whatever. So I don't know if in general the county's already been thinking about other ways of getting messages out, but I think radio would be a great medium to consider. Maybe in some cases it's direct mail, maybe it's something else, but we should be thinking about, in this current climate, what are the innovative ways that we need to think about outreach and communication, because it will be different than what we've ever seen before.
And I also think that outreach, Randy, also, the point I was also trying to make is that I think that outreach needs to go to communities that may not also be represented in your City Club audiences. And that's specifically why I mentioned Radio 1, which I know targets the population that may not exact. So you hear what I'm saying? Okay. Also, just before, and I just want to make sure, because I haven't been as good with looking at the chat, that there is a suggestion on the chat that maybe we create a subcommittee that focuses on community engagement and to identify the voices that are not currently at the table and bring the issues and individuals forward. So someone did suggest that idea.
And I think that we can also just use standard social media like, Twitter and Facebook and things like that. I mean, a lot of people may not have the laptop or the tablet to be able to do a Zoom call, but a lot of folks have more access to Facebook and Twitter. And it would be interesting to do like a live event to say, this is the group and these are some of the things that we're working on, and then people can chime in with their feedback. Because we can reach a very large group of people by doing that. And it's, not expensive at all. And it still kind of reaches out to folks that would be able to chime in real time. And then if we establish like a Twitter page, same thing. Have somebody monitoring those comments, that could be a way to get a lot of information from the targeted population, in addition to like all the other things that people have already mentioned.
That feels important, as does Phyllis's suggestion. And my only kind of concern as to how we've described this so far is that we're solely focused on what seems to be the coalition of the willing. And I just can't emphasize enough that we have to also help folks who don't feel confronted by racism, maybe don't even believe it exists in their day-to-day lives. How do we bring them into this work, help them see it as important? I'm reminded of the book Dying of Whiteness. Like, this is a collective issue, and it's one of the reasons I'm glad to be part of the county level work, because we need the community of folks who are energized about this and engaged about this to see this as shared work, and not look to undo our efforts and organize in that way, because they don't understand the intent and the reason this is important for their community, though it might be far from people of color.
I was just going to also offer that maybe even the use of standard surveys. A lot of times people want to be able to express themselves, but maybe not openly. So I think utilizing surveys might be a good way to kind of catch or grab some of that audience that may not come to some of the town meetings, may not use social media, may not have the ability to get online. So, you know, especially when we're speaking about vulnerable populations, I think just the standard survey, utilizing those would definitely help reach that audience. It's also a good mechanism that's used when surveying employees to show what their experience has been in regards to racism. So I think just a matter of utilizing kind of what we've always used in the past, surveys as a good tool to kind of grab that audience, but as well allowing them to be able to kind of speak their minds without necessarily everyone knowing what they're saying as well.
We have a very good communications department. I'm sure they would appreciate if somebody on this group would want to be the contact person and work with them starting soon to help develop some of these ideas that you've come out with. I think they're all good, whether it's radio or city club or whatever. Eddie,
you guys recall earlier when I talked about a tricky proposition. This is time for one of you guys to enter into a tricky proposition to sign up.
And of course, I mean, I think part of my role, or at least the role I envision that I will have in supporting you, whoever does sign up with that, I will obviously assist and work with you and make sure that Armin's communication team does in fact support this very important work.
I'd be willing to step up. Would love partners. If anyone else is interested.
I'm sorry, Victor, you would love what? A partner, you said?
I would love a partner if anyone else is willing to step up as well.
I'll step up.
Okay, so that's great. So I'm going to call this the media or the community outreach subcommittee. And Victor and Levine and I will, we can work directly. Eliza Wing is Armin's communication director. And I believe she has a staff of folks. So I don't know if she will assign someone to assist you or if Armin will have her do that, but we can figure that out. And we can talk offline. Okay.
I have a question. I know these meetings are public. Are they also recorded?
So yeah, so my understanding is when I asked that they be set up so that they are live streamed, that they also will be archived and available on the website.
So the live stream or this actual Zoom?
This actual Zoom meeting, which is what folks are looking at the live stream, will be available on YouTube archive, so they can go back and hear our actual meeting again.
Okay, so if I could make a suggestion, Zoom has a feature where when you record, it also transcribes the conversation. So it's actually, you have to enable that. So if maybe that could be looked at, just again, as we look at how we're going to communicate with people, that could be something we offer, is the actual transcription of the meeting.
Yeah, that's something we can talk about with communications. That's totally outside of my bailiwick. The way I understood it when it was set up was that we had the Zoom meeting set up so that the public couldn't join the Zoom meeting. So we kept it so we wouldn't get quote unquote Zoom bombed. But at the same time, we were also providing it via live stream so the public could watch the meeting. And then that live stream is actually what is archived onto YouTube and available, sort of in the way in which, I'm sure you all probably know this, the way in which our Cuyahoga County Council committee meetings and regular meetings are done the same way. I think also Armin's briefings at the Board of Health are done like that as well. But yeah, that's something, I don't know, Armin, would that be something Eliza would look into? I don't know anything about that.
Yes, that would be something that I think she's listening in, and she'll take that up.
Okay. think I just want to say in closing, I really want to thank each of you for your commitment to this council and for working with Cuyahoga County to develop policy changes to advance equity, address racism, and hopefully reduce the disparities between Black and white residents of our county. I look forward to assisting you and doing this most important work and being a resource to you in any way I can. I also want to thank you, obviously, for your time and your commitment. I want to pat myself on the back for keeping this in 2 hours as promised. I don't know if I can continue to do that, but I will try because I know your time is extremely valuable. Eddie, I can follow up with you offline as well as Victor and Levine and others. And I believe you all have my contact information. If you don't, I will send it. And please know that I really am here as a resource. Janice and Eddie, and I wrote down, and Phyllis, obviously, and Heidi, I'll also follow up with you to get something scheduled with Peter, and then we can put a date to report back to the whole group.
Great.
I think on the chat, which I just figured out I could look at, I think that Phyllis and Habiba also volunteered to work on the community engagement subcommittee.
Oh, that's awesome. And what I was going to have someone do, someone was going to print all the chats for me so that in case I missed anything, and I do see that now. Thank you, County Executive, and thank you, Habiba, and Phyllis. Is it Phyllis?
Phyllis.
Yes, thank you, Phyllis and Habiba, for volunteering to work on that. That's great. Eddie, lots of folks are leading as you've charged them with. We're going to have other committees with no leaders.
Good job, everyone. Thank you.
Is there anything else anyone would like to say before we sign off?
Is there anyone taking written minutes of this meeting?
That is precisely what I was going to ask. And then also about the next meeting date, I don't think that we are fully clear on that, but I
okay.
just wanted to know.
So I will address both of those. So I am a one-man shop of great non-unionized workers who are helping me with this. So I will put together some minutes. I have been taking some notes, but we will have some minutes put together that I will share. Just give me some time to get them together that I will share with you well in advance of the next meeting. That answers the first question. The second question, my understanding, and I may have misunderstood, Yanela, was that the smaller subcommittee was going to get together to meet with Peter and sort of do some recognizance about what he could provide to us in terms of some systematic mapping. And then after that meeting, hopefully by the end of August, we could have sort of a follow-up meeting, sort of report back on what we want to do with him. Also, maybe tailor in some other discussions some open items from today, and then start setting sort of monthly meetings beginning in September.
So the only thing I'd suggest, Ayla, and let's try to do these contemporaneously. So let's get the meeting with Peter as quickly as we can within the next, I don't know if the meeting will be scheduled, but let's get the date within the next couple of days, early next week at the latest. Once that date is secured, then we can quickly thereafter set the date for follow-up with this group. In other words, give folks notice, as much notice as we can. So we'll have, and let's say we have Peter August 30th, fine. Then maybe once we know that, we can get this group for September something, so that there is that advance. But
I will make a pledge. I will get in touch with Heidi within the next 24 hours and hopefully by the end of the week, latest early next week, find some available dates for Peter to meet with us. And maybe, what do you think, Eddie? Just an hour of his time, or?
Yeah, that's plenty. Yeah.
I'm meeting with him at 1 today, so.
So great. Heidi, can you see if he has some time available? And
I will. I actually think I might have access to his calendar too. So
okay.
If I don't, I'll ask him for it.
Perfect. And then we can set up some time. And is he based out of, well, we did, I forgot we're living in COVID. Nobody goes anywhere. So we'll set it up via Zoom. Sorry.
Well, Naila, you know it's now 12:04, right? So
I know.
That pat on the back.
It's gone. It's wiped off.
All right.
All right. Well, everyone, unless there's anything else, again, really thank you. I think this is such critical, important work, and as you all do. So again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Nyla.
Thank you. Take care,
Everyone have a great day. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.